Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The weather is beautiful, and I'm taking a stroll on a little break from work. And I thought I would record a podcast for you while I walk up to the library, and then I'll record another on the way home, as has been my wont over the last couple of weeks. So I was looking back, and it's been something like 12 episodes since I did one of these, and I wanted to make this process a somewhat regular thing on the podcast, and I felt like doing it again. So today I am doing a look back. So when we get to January, I look back at the games released 2 years before that January. So for instance, this January, I had a top games of 2021 episode. I don't like to do the top games of the game of the year just finished, because often I haven't played very many of them yet. So I give it an extra year for me to for some of those games to percolate into my collection, or for me to get a chance to play them from other people and so on. So what I wanted to do today is go back and look at the top games from and so then what I started doing is going back and looking at top games from years before I started doing this. So the first year that I did that was in 2020. I looked at games from 2018. So about a month and a half ago, I did top games from 2017. And today I thought I would do top games from 2016. I'm just going to keep going backward until I get to a point where I can't really comment with reasonable amounts on those games. Now, I've run into a problem with this particular top games list. So I looked at the top, according to Board Game Geek, I looked through the top 1,500 games on Board Game Geek, and I looked at the top 1,500 games made, and there were 98 of the top 1,500 were made in 2016. Of those 98, I had played 45 of them. Not bad, not bad. So my first inclination is just to tell you my top 5 games. Unfortunately, that's already pretty easy to do, because 5 of the games made in 2016 are already in my top 50 list. So I'm going to tell you those in order first, and I'm not going to talk a lot about them because these are games that have gotten coverage on the channel before, on the podcast before. So instead, I'm going to explain. So in order, Terraforming Mars is number 11 on my top 50. Star Wars Rebellion is my number 23 on my top 50. A Feast for Odin is my number 24. Arkham Horror, the card game, is my number 4 game of all time. And Clank, a deck building game, is my number 50. So there are already 5 games from 2016 in my top 50 list. So if I wanted to be lazy about it, I could just say my top 5 games from 2015 are Arkham Horror, the card game, Terraforming Mars, Star Wars Rebellion, A Feast for Odin, and Clank. Boom, done. But that's boring. So what I decided to do instead is I looked through the other 40 games from 2016 that I played, and I picked out 10 that I thought were noteworthy and interesting to play. So if I had to make a top 10 list of games from 2016 that I had played that were not in my top 50 already, here they would be. I guess another way to say it would be the next 10 if I made a top 15 list, these are the next 10. All right, so the number 1 game from 2016 that's not in my top 50 is Scythe. Scythe, of course, is a Euro game disguised as a war game. It's got these big stompy mechs that you use to move around the map and do a little bit of light competitive area control. But really what you're doing is trying to manage your resources and your units enough to get 5 stars the fastest. Scythe is a great game. I've played it a few times with multiple players. Maybe I probably have 4 or 5 plays under my belt where I'm playing with 3 or 4 people. But then I played the whole Rise of Fenris campaign with my buddy Paul, just the 2 of us. And that was pretty fun as well. So that's Scythe. That one's really great. My number 2 game is actually, there are 3 games in the top 1,500 from 2016 that all count in this way. And this is the Exit series. Of course, the Exit series are 1-play escape room style games that come in a small box. And when you play them, you often destroy components, which makes them different than many of the other escape room style games, but it also means the puzzles they have are really interesting. All 3 of the games from the original trilogy of Exit games, all 3 of those made it into the top 1,500 on Board Game Geek. I think because at the time they were so unique that they all got rated really highly. I think compared to the wide market of escape room games that are available today, they still hold up, but they're not as incredible as they seem. But nonetheless, they were pretty groundbreaking at the time. I remember when these games came out, they also spurred a huge conversation about one-play games in general, this idea that you might have a game that you buy and you only play it once and then you throw it away. I mean, it was already at the same time we saw the emergence of the Unlock games and the Escape Room, the game. These all came out pretty much at the same time. Escape Room, the game, actually came up as also a 2016 game. And all three of these had this sort of concern built into them. I think the big difference for Exit the game is that you destroy them, so you couldn't even pass them along to other people. You know, the standard response I think that most people give now is like, well, for 4 people is, 2 to 4 people playing an Exit game for an hour, $15 is a pretty cheap price for 4 people to do anything for an hour of paid entertainment. And I am sympathetic to that argument. I think it's a valid one and really fits the situation. So my number 2, the Exit series. My number 3 is Secret Hitler, and this is kind of in spite of myself. I really like playing Secret Hitler. I think it's a really solid social deduction game. I prefer it in other modes. There's a Secret Voldemort mode. There's a Secret Palpatine mode, which I think fits the version very well. Design partner Rob reskinned it to Christmas as Secret Krampus. All 3 of these I prefer to Secret Hitler. But Secret Hitler is the one that people know, and that's the copy that I have in my game club, and I really enjoy it. I just wish it had a different theme. Number 4, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I really like this game. This probably gets as high as it does on my personal playlist, more for the family experience of playing all the way through the adventures than for the game itself. Like, I think the game is good, but my family really liked the game, particularly my mother-in-law. And whenever she would come over, we would play Harry Potter. And it got to the point where we would try to beat whatever mission we were on, and we slowly worked our way through the whole game. We worked our way through both expansions. And we had a great time doing it. It really worked out nicely, and it became a kind of family tradition for several years there. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. As a deck building game, it's really good, but I think it has some problems in terms of just luck of the draw really can rail you in terms of where the enemies come out. But that's kind of always the case with deck builders. It also, for the base game anyway, there are hardly any cards that let you thin your deck, which means that if you do the thing that's most fun about a deck builder, which is buy more cards for your deck, what often ends up happening is, unless you're being very careful about which cards you buy, you're making your deck less effective, not more, which is kind of a bummer. I don't like deck builders where you have to be super picky about which cards you buy. There is more efficiency and less efficiency as variables, and I totally agree with that and buy into it. But when good play means don't buy a card most of the time, or a lot of the time, I don't find that fun. But we had a great time with Harry Potter. It has a strong place in my memory. So it's number 4, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. Or number 9, I guess. Next up, we have Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. For those of you who are younger to the hobby, you may not know, Mansions of Madness has gone through 2 editions. When it first came out, it was a one versus many game where you had one storyteller who ran the game. They set up the game. They had this big book to describe what happened. They played for the monsters, and they had all of these things that could happen. Problem was, it wasn't very fun for that person because there wasn't a lot of agency. You're really standing in for the system. And 2, if you screwed something up, you'd ruin the game. And there are many stories of people like setting something up and leaving one token off or putting the wrong token in the wrong spot. And then people play for 2.5 hours and they discover that token was wrong and the whole game was ruined. And that's a bummer. You don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen. So when they came out with Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, and it used an app to manage all of that extra stuff, and the players all just got to play, it was a revelation. And what a neat game it is. It's pretty expensive for what it is. But boy, it's neat, and it's really fun. It's very swingy, as most Arkham Files games are, but really fun, really interesting, well worth playing if you get a chance. Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, my number 10, I guess, from 2016. One thing I can tell is that I certainly was knee-deep in the hobby at this point, right? 2016 is quite a while ago, but I still remember very clearly the ways that many of these games made a splash in the hobby and the way that people talked about these games. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting when I get to the point where I wasn't paying attention to games yet at this point. But yes, I was at this point. All right, next up we have number 6, Tyrants of the Underdark. Tyrants of the Underdark is a really interesting deck building game combined with area control. You know, when Lost Ruins of Arnak came out and Dune Imperium came out, people were like, whoa, deck building combined with worker placement, crazy. And people started talking about like deck building combined with something is new. And I was like, well, Martin Wallace has been doing that a long time. But you know who even did it better, I think? Tyrants of the Underdark. This game is an amazing mix of traditional deck building game where you're buying cards within a market, and then you're using that to move your units around. It's very fighty, very cruel, and the visual design on it fits the theme really well, right? It's supposed to be Underdark, this sort of notorious Drow city in the Forgotten Realms world. But that means that it's all dark and gloomy, and I think the game colors were like white, black, orange, and purple, and the board was hard to read, and it just it did not look great to some people. I thought it looked pretty fine, but did not look great. So that's a game I think very fondly of and really enjoyed. Tyrants of the Underdark. I will say, working on memory here, I played it once, so maybe I'm over remembering it, but there it is. That'd be my number 11. The next one I want to talk about is Happy Salmon. This comes very close to being a perfect tiny game. Happy Salmon is a game where you stand around a circle and you try to match what you have with what other people have through shouting and hand gestures and running around. It is 5 minutes of pure delight packed into a neoprene fish, and I love it. Happy Salmon. If you haven't played it, you should. If you can get a copy, the folks at Exploding Kittens picked it up and have published a new version of it, so it is available commercially again, and you should buy it if you can because it's great. Happy Salmon. My number 13 game from 2016 is Awkward Guests. Now this one is a late entry because I only first played this like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, as opposed to I didn't play it when it came out in 2016. In fact, I didn't know about it, but apparently it came out in a small edition. Some people thought it was amazing, and then Tom Vassell, of his wiseness at the Dice Tower, played it and thought it was amazing and decided to pick it up as part of the Dice Tower Essentials line. And so Awkward Guests got republished in line with the Dice Tower Essentials line, and that's how it came to much more prominence, and that's why I've heard of it. Or maybe he just gave it a really, really good review. I don't recall. Anyway, it's really good. It's sort of like Super Clue. If you like Clue, you'll like Awkward Guests because it's basically Clue, but much better. The only thing I don't like about it is the color palette. It's all sepia tone for some reason. I don't know, beiges, whites, blacks, grays, for no good reason that I can see, except that maybe they wanted to do 2-color printing instead of 4-color printing. It's not. The color scheme is gross, but the game is amazing. That's Awkward Guests. Number 9, this was one of the first Martin Wallace games after a study in Emerald that I picked up like right when it came out. And this is Via Nebula. This is a game published by Space Cowboys with a weird, cutesy theme, but it's basically like my first train game, or particularly like my first Steam. The idea is that you have these building areas and there are these resources, and you're connecting the resources to building areas through these grassy paths. And when you connect them, then you can move the resources from the place where they are to the building area, and then you can use those to develop the building area that you're trying to do. It's a race game. You're trying to, the first one to finish 5 contracts ends the game, and then you see how many points you have. So you can go small contracts and try to finish all 5, or you could go big contracts and try to finish fewer of them, which works out just fine. So it's a really good game, quite a enjoyable time. It looks really pretty. The insert that it came with it, as I recall, is garbage. I remember it was really difficult to use. I built my own insert out of foam core, which is also a little hard to use, but fun. Via Nebula is great if you get a chance to try it. Really interesting game and a fun time. That's Via Nebula, number 9. Or not number 9, number 14. And finally, number 10, number 15, the last game I'm going to call out here directly is Mystic Vale. Mystic Vale was the first of the card crafting games from John D. Clare. In it, he used sleeves as a way to hold together multiple layers of cards, basically borrowing the layered see-through cards effect from Gloom and making it into a deck building game. Except that you don't add more cards to your deck, you just make the cards in your deck better. It's a really neat idea and a fun game to play. I've never played it in physical form. I've only ever played it using the Yucata.de implementation, which I enjoy quite a bit. It's one of those games that I've always been on the lookout. If I found a cheap copy, if I got a copy in trade, I would absolutely want it because I think it's a neat idea and I've always wanted to play it in person, but there it is. Now there's a lot of games in from this era that I never played, but I would absolutely want to play at some point. The ones that stand out the most of games that I should play but haven't, I haven't played Vinhos, I haven't played Valeria Card Kingdoms, I haven't played Star Trek Ascendancy, haven't played Fabled Fruit, I haven't played Max vs. Minions or Aeon's End. All of those are games that have really good reputations and games that I would love to try if I had the opportunity. I think of games that I have played that people would be surprised I didn't call out. I don't really like Imhotep. Islebound almost made it onto my list, as did Fields of Green. World's Fair 1893 I found pretty disappointing, although it was fun. I just was hoping it was going to be a lot of fun. Mythos Tales was good, but had a ton of typos in the edition I played. I think they released a second edition that did not have those typos, but that's not the one I had. As it was a fun time. It was sort of like Sherlock Holmes, but with Cthulhu. And then we had the Jack the Ripper Tales, Sherlock Holmes and the Whitechapel Mysteries or whatever it was. I thought those ones are fine. I don't really like the Jack the Ripper ones. I don't know, something about the realism of them got to me. So we did play them, but they weren't my favorite. But overall, 2016 was an amazing year for board games. And hopefully this has given you a sense of which games I like. Oh, I guess the one that people probably are most from 2016 that I think is just fine and am not super into is Great Western Trail. People love Great Western Trail, and I think it's just okay. So there you go. Well, thanks for joining me on my walk today. Let me know what you think. What are your favorite games of 2016? What should I have called out? What should I put higher? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and post your thoughts there. You can send me a direct message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username. You can drop me an email, Brendan@Rattlebox Games. I want to say thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Is all what's the word I'm looking for? The color of old photographs, what? I can't get sepia tone. It's all sepia tone.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.